You all have probably know about the new generation of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. It has, for one reason or another, become an overnight sensation. Whether or not you like the show yourself, you have to admit that its success is impressive. However, it raises a question. Lauren Frost has worked on other popular shows and has been working on her very own line of toys, the Galaxy Girls. How did she end up creating a remake of some 80s toys commercial instead of working on her own show ideas? Could it be she just misses her times in childhood of My Little Pony toys? Or something? But even then, what artists would rather work on their own ideas? I read this news story a few years ago. It was about 6 girls who all went to the same school and died on the same day, November 7th, 2004. A friend of mine from NC sent me the article from a small local newspaper. I forgot about it until I watched a few episodes of My Little Pony and realized the main characters are surprisingly similar to the girls who died. I decided to look for that article again. The paper had either gotten shut down or I had misremembered the name, so I tracked down my old World of Warcraft buddy and asked him for the article. Turned out he happened to have the file saved to his computer, and I was right. There's a definite connection here. The first girl, named Samantha Gales, was obviously the impression of Fluttershy, a shy girl who, what her classmates didn't know was that she was constantly abused at home by her mother and stepfather. Her mother consented her at age 15, and she blamed her poor Samantha for ruining her life. This made Samantha self-conscious. When her stepfather moved in, this made the abuse worsen. Her stepfather never liked having to take care of Samantha when her mother was away, so he locked her in the basement and left her, sometimes for the whole day. Her mother tolerated this, and as she grew, would hit Samantha for taking her out of turn. When her half sister was born, the abuse became constantly worse. She would be starved, forced to sleep outside, and sometimes beaten outright. Because she dressed in shabby clothes and had low self-esteem, she was often picked on by other kids at school. Her only friends were animals she would rescue, which her family would make her get rid of. She committed suicide by overdose. The second, named Janice Walters, was also one of the popular girls. She was rich, smart, beautiful, and seemed to have a life that was charming. However, her parents argued constantly and were really only together for the appearance. She was held up to the highest standard, which made her a perfectionist. She wanted to be the designer and live in Paris, but her parents wanted her to remain in Colonia and marry a proper man, one of good breeding and high income. For the most part, her parents ignored her. Her parents only concerned about appearing rich and the highest social standing, but in reality, her mother married her father because of money, and since he had accumulated so much debt, they had been losing money fast. This is what got her interested in fashion, since she started making her own fashionable clothes to maintain their appearance of wealth. She died in a car crash when her mother and father got into an argument over money while he was driving. Her neck was snapped on impact and died instantly. She was clearly the impression of reality. Then there was Alexandra Matthews. Alex was a competitive girl. She always sought to be the best at the best, especially at sports, track in particular. Her father always wanted a boy, and since her mother was declared incapable of having a child, he decided to raise her as if she was his own son. In the end though, she loved her mother and father, and was more than happy to play sports with her father. She excelled at them, even This made her popular, and by the time she was in high school, she was being sought out as an athletic scout from colleges all over the country. This made her try even harder. She had always wanted to compete in the Olympics. However, when she was 15, her mother, who had been told she couldn't have another child, had a son. After that, her parents didn't pay much attention to her, which made her even more determined to succeed. She ended up pushing herself so hard at track. She neglected her friends, her grades, and even her personal health. At one point, she became so desperate, she started taking steroids. What her and her family didn't know was that she had a minor heart condition that the steroids worsened. Since she was pushing herself so hard, physically as well, she ended up collapsing during a match due to a heart weakness. She died in the hospital a few days later. In the show, Rainbow Dash seemed to be the most similar. The girl most similar to Applejack, Jamie Sanders, was a farm girl, just like the character based off of her. What the show didn't include was that her farm was run down, and her family always struggled with money. She oftentimes worked odd jobs under the table to try and help to support her family. She had many brothers and sisters, and she was the second, which meant it was up to her and her brother to take care of the younglings. This meant she didn't have enough time to hang out with friends or take any extra activities, or even do her homework on most nights. She had an aunt, whom her family was from Manhattan was based off, who kept offering to send money and support her mother and father, but they were proud and always refused. That is until her father died from a heart attack in 2001. Her mother followed shortly after, having killed herself when she couldn't handle the pressure of taking care of all the children. They were taken in by their grandma, who was incapable of truly taking care of them. Jamie herself oftentimes helped out with the family's yard, worked to keep her family afloat. She died when she fell in the wood chipper. Pinkie Pie's impression probably had the saddest story. Katherine Jackson was a foster child and moved from home to home. Her birth father killed her mother and himself in a fit of rage when she was 5. And she could never quite settle into a good home. Some of the foster families who would take her and were mainly interested in the support of adopting a child would bring, and would refuse to feed or clothe her. Even when she was in a nice home with a good family, the old memories still haunted her, breaking the fragile sanity into a million pieces. She would have nightmares of her mother screaming and bleeding, and her father screaming for her, claiming to be after her next. By the time she was in high school, she completely snapped. She started to hallucinate and act out in class. Many of the other kids and even teachers assumed she was merely hyperactive and was trying to be funny. She would oftentimes paint and draw and write down fictional things, and dressing in over-the-top clothing. All the while her condition was getting worse and worse. The voices and images became more realistic and more demanding. She died when she jumped off a building, one of the voices having told her that she could fly. What makes this last fact even more chilling is that Lauren originally designed Pinkie Pie to be a Pegasus, as seen in the early development sketches. The last, Twilight Sparkle, was an A student by the name of Cynthia Little. She was held up to a high standard from a young age. Her older brother was always getting rewards, from achievements to acting, and she was held up to the same high standards. She ended up neglecting other facets of her life in order to make sure She got the best grades. For a while, this worked. Her parents were proud of her accomplishments and bragged to their friends about having not just one genius child, but two. This is until a local private academy for the gifted started to become interested in her, among several other advanced students. She knew that this would be the best opportunity she could have to prove herself as a perfect child, but the pressure was high. She knew that there was limited spots for new students, and she knew that there would be a test and an essay required to get in. So she became a little desperate. She studied to the point where she would hardly eat and never sleep. As the test closed in, she panicked, and she opted to find an essay online to copy. And during the test, resorted to cheating. When she was caught, her parents were horrified. She sank into deep depression and eventually hung herself to save herself the shame of being an imperfect child. You might be wondering now, why would Lauren Frost would even inspire to make a sweet children's show inspired by such depressing events? Perhaps she felt some odd need to give the girls closure, or perhaps to tell their stories in another way she could. Think about it. In the shows, Fluttershy is able to take care of the animals she adored. Rarity is a successful designer and loving parent. Rainbow Dash is in fact a great athlete. Applejack was a successful farm. And Pinkie Pie is happy with not a care in the world. And Twilight Sparkle was accepted into an exclusive school. Maybe, just maybe, she wanted to give the spirits of these girls what they always wanted. And I think they're happy.